Have you ever had the experience that you really need to move your body, but you know that your movement will annoy your roommate or your partner? Or maybe, like me, you had a kiddo who needed three sources of music from their toys playing at once, even though it drove me into auditory overload. If this sounds familiar, we're talking all about what to do when your stims compete today on Neurodiverging. Tune in. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Neurodiverging Podcast. I am so happy to be here with you. My name is Danielle Sullivan. Today, we are talking all about navigating competing access needs. Access needs are just what do you as a human need to be able to access in order to feel like your needs are being met? And what happens if I need something and you need something and those needs do not work out together? This happens, we see it a lot with stims. Stims are just noises, movements, things we do as human beings to make ourselves feel calmer, more regulated, and to release excess anxiety or stress. All humans stim, but we see it more often or more pronounced sometimes, you might say, in some neurodivergent populations. And something that I have noticed, and I'm sure many of us have noticed, the more and more I work with neurodivergent people and neurodivergent families, especially, is that often my need to stim will annoy somebody else, or their need to stim will similarly send me into some kind of overload. So today we're talking all about what to do when your stims compete, when your stim causes someone else stress, and vice versa, and how to handle that. So, first, the premise is, right, that in diverse communities, and we want our communities to be diverse, individuals will have unique access needs, and sometimes those needs will conflict. For instance, one person's vocal stimming might cause auditory overload for somebody else. Or my example of my first child wanted all of his musical toys on at once, and I think it helped part of his brain calm down. But for me, who has an auditory processing challenge, so many sources of sound was incredibly overwhelming and overstimulating. Similarly, we've heard from many of our ADHD listeners that captions can be very distracting for them, but they aid people like me again with auditory processing needs. And if you're ADHD and you have auditory processing needs, you might sometimes even conflict with yourself on what's going to be more supportive for your needs in the moment. So, all of these situations highlight the challenge of balancing different needs without placing blame, right? Because my needs aren't something I should be blamed for. By viewing these conflicts as structural issues, we can collaboratively develop strategies that respect everyone's requirements. So, first, let's just spend a minute understanding competing access needs. Access needs are essential requirements that enable individuals to participate fully in various environments. When these needs clash, it can lead to misunderstandings and discomfort. Recognizing that such conflicts are systemic rather than personal is crucial. This perspective fosters empathy and encourages collaborative problem solving. If you need more information on what it means to say that these are systemic issues, we have links down below. But briefly, what we are saying is that my need for silence or low audio environment is not necessarily something that is my fault, and the burden of it should not necessarily rest on me completely as an individual. I do have the requirement to be a human and ask for what I need and try to solve problems myself. But when we are in a society together, we are going to understand that sometimes my needs should be provided for by the larger cultural norm. So when we say that, say, someone who has a verbal tick that is loud should be allowed to access spaces. And also, someone like me who is easily startled might need to access the same space. We are looking at a case where both of us as humans are totally valid and our needs are totally valid. And there's still a conflict in the space between someone who needs to be able to be loud and someone who cannot handle that loudness. Okay, that's a systemic issue. And it encourages collaborative problem solving. So let's talk about some strategies for addressing conflicting needs. We'll be talking today about 5 strategies for addressing conflicting needs that you can use. And this can be in a small microcosm of you and your partner, you and your family, all the way out to creating community spaces where we are going to be serving folks with lots of different kinds of access needs. And the first thing that we've also talked about in depth in many of our previous podcast episodes is open communication. We need to be able to discuss our needs transparently without fearing repercussion or guilt. We need to be able to encourage open dialogue where individuals can express their access needs without fear of judgment. Understanding each person's requirements is the first step towards finding solutions. One episode I remember offhand where we talked about this was in my discussion with Jake Didinsky. We were talking about autistic people accessing kink spaces and accessing also club spaces, right? Understanding what those folks would need to feel safe and confident and comfortable in those spaces is the first step to figuring out how to create a club environment or a kink environment where people can feel like they can ask for what they need and have their needs met. We also see this discussing needs transparently in the microcosm of the family. My example of my kiddo needs a lot of sound to be regulated and lots of sound dysregulates me means that kiddo and I need to be able to come together as family members who are on the same team to say, okay, you need this and I need this. How could we make this work? And have that conversation without anybody blaming anybody else. One really important aspect of this open communication is active listening, being able to listen, to understand, and not to respond, to reduce your own reactivity and your own defensiveness and hear what the other person is saying to you. This approach ensures that all voices are heard and valued. Our second strategy for today is collaborative problem solving, and we talk about this a lot too. Collaborative problem solving is just about coming together, having the mindset of being on the same team with the people you're with and figuring out, okay, how could we make this work for as many people as possible? And what are the possibilities for the folks for whom this idea will not work? What else can we do, right? What can we do to fix this? So first, one option is to seek compromises, to work together to find a middle ground. For example, with me and my son, what we decided was that at certain times a day, he had full access to his music, and at certain times a day, I had full access to quiet. Similarly, we have a thing in my family where my kids are able to wrestle, stim, yell, bump into walls, throw things, with safety regulations, right? But basically do what they want within reason, and make as much noise as they want in all of the house except in my room. My room is quiet room. We do not wrestle in here. We do not yell in here. We do not have disagreements in here. We can have calm disagreements, but we do not have like raised voice disagreements, right? So this is another example of compromise, right? That I get what I need and they get what they need in different ways. So we have worked together to figure that out over time, and we have tweaked it as we needed. Other examples are scheduling vocal stimming activities during times when other people are less affected, using designated spaces, having sensory baskets around so people who are overstimulated. So I have my piles of earplugs. So if I need to go into the rest of the house, I can wear earplugs and they can still do what they need to do. This is collaboration. This is a compromise. Second, we can implement flexible solutions. We can think flexibly about what the problem is actually is. Do they need to get their energy out? Okay, so maybe should we talk about getting them out of the house more, signing them up for a dance class, something like that? Do I need to be responsible in some cases for my own regulation and be proactive in calming myself down and taking care of myself in such a way that I'm less reactive to noise? Also, again, sensory kits, right? Do we have noise canceling headphones around? Do I have my earplugs around? Do we have written materials alongside captions for our listeners when we're doing a webinar, right? Do I have low text slides available for people who might need that text in order to hear me better? So how can we be flexible and be adaptive to the majority of our people as best we can? Number three, establishing clear boundaries. It's really important when you have a need that you are able to articulate that need. And that means also deciding how much other people's needs are about you and how much they're about the other person. And this is a complex topic. But generally, what we can do is we can define our personal limits. We can encourage other people to articulate what they can and cannot tolerate, right? This can be really hard because a lot of us are raised to be very polite, and we don't want to say outright, when you do this, it makes me upset, right? Or when I hear this, it makes me upset, because we feel like we're being a burden, and we don't like feeling like we're a burden. However, if we're not able to articulate what our need is, we definitely cannot solve the problem collaboratively. So many of us have to kind of get over our own concerns about being a burden and step into our step into our needs, be vulnerable and say, when this happens in my environment, it makes me reactive and I need help balancing that out. What can we talk about it? Okay. So Clear articulation and then clear boundaries help prevent misunderstandings. Me saying, my room is an open room, but it has to stay quiet. You can always come in, you are always welcome, but it is a quiet room. That's a boundary. And yeah, sometimes they might want to come in and access me while they're being loud. And in those times, I'm allowed to say, this is my boundary. I need this in order to be a good parent to you and to be a good friend to you. Setting those boundaries in a way that is collaborative, well defined, and clear and consistent can really help. Second, we want to respect differences. We want to acknowledge that everyone's needs are valid, even when they conflict. My kiddo's need for a lot of stimulus is just as valid as my need for quiet. And both humans, my cat is having a sneeze attack, both humans deserve to have those access needs met in the best we possibly can do it. Mutual respect is the key to coexistence. It's the key to diversity. If you want to have a lot of diverse kinds of people around, you're going to have to be ready to deal with that diversity and to respect that diversity. And that is, in fact, something that we feel very strongly about over here. Fourth, we want to create inclusive environments to the best of our ability. One thing you can do, whether this is again in your house, in your church, in your school, is designate quiet zones. You establish areas where noise is minimized to accommodate those with auditory sensitivities. You can think about this too with visual sensitivities, with touch. Are there ways that you can reduce some of that sensory overwhelm for those of us who deal with sensory overwhelm in certain areas? We can move ourselves, into a place where we'll feel safer without affecting other people. Flexible scheduling is another way to handle this, right? So we can allow people to choose times for activities that align with our access needs, reducing potential conflicts. I have a brain in the morning. I do not have a brain in the evening. If I am not allowed to schedule my day to accommodate that, you'll end up with a lot of bad work from me because I'm needing to be working in a time that is not reasonable for my needs. Similarly, this works with, hey, we can be loud all morning, and then from 12 to 2 is quiet time in our day. The key to creating inclusive environments is to understand, A, that you will not actually be able to include every single person despite best efforts, but that doesn't mean we don't continue to make those best efforts. We're going to do our best to figure out together how to make the space the best it can be for as many kinds of people as possible, okay? The fact that we can't actually be 100% inclusive all the time doesn't mean we don't aim for 99.9% inclusivity. And the last thing is seek external support. You don't have to do all this by yourself. I think a lot of times we feel like it's on us. And for many of us, we've grown up in such a way that it is on us a lot of the time to figure stuff out. But actually, there's a whole wide world of people whose jobs it is to figure this out for you. And I bet a lot of them could use the work right now. So first, consult professional people, engage occupational therapists or accessibility consultants, hire your DEI people to develop tailored strategies for complex situations. They've done this before. They know what they need to do. They have access to the research. Pay them and do it well. The second thing is you can utilize mediation services. So in cases where you just have a lot of conflict and you cannot work through it on your own for whatever reason, we have mediators who are again trained to facilitate discussions to reach good collaborative solutions, even in cases where you couldn't do it one-on-one. That's what mediators are for. That's what they're good at. And again, they have the expertise to do a really good job for you if it's not working with the skills that you currently possess. We're all learning all the time. None of us are able to do everything all the time. Honor where you don't have the skills to do the thing and get somebody else to help you. You do not have to feel bad about that. Let's talk for a minute about reframing our perspectives. It's really important to shift from viewing individual humans as problems to recognizing systemic issues. By adopting a neuroaffirming approach, we are challenging the dominant narratives that often marginalize diverse needs. This kind of perspective of moving away from you are the problem to the system is the problem, it emphasizes the environment and not the individual should adapt to accommodate differences. Most of us are spending all of our waking lives adapting. Sometimes it's time for the environment to adapt to us instead. Creating truly inclusive spaces requires collective effort. We can start by fostering open dialogues about access needs within your communities. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to the people closest to you about what their access needs are and how we could do it better. Learn and educate yourself and others on the importance of accommodating diverse requirements. If you notice that your schools or your government meeting places or your churches are not accessible, talk to somebody about it in an open, collaborative way. Again, you're on the same team with those people. How could you work on it together? Okay. By working together, we can build environments where everyone feels valued and supported. Thank you so much for joining me on the Neurodiverging podcast today. I hope you learned something. I hope it was helpful. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a rating in Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. Share with a friend and check out the links below to get on our mailing list and to learn more about what Neurodiverging is up to. We always have events going on. We would love to see you at one. Thank you so much to our patrons who make this podcast possible. I'm so excited to be reconnecting with you all after our little break and look forward to seeing you in future podcasts. Please remember, we are all in this together.